Today we're doing James chapter 5, which is the last chapter of the book of James. The last. Let me just open my Bible real quick. Alright, so in chapter 5 we have a lot to cover, so we're just gonna head in right now. The first passage of chapter 5 from verse 1 through 6, it starts off kind of heavy because So as I was saying, it starts off kind of heavy because it addresses the non-believers that are rich. And the reason why it does that is because they're more likely to not depend on God. When you're rich, you can take care of yourself and there's less things to pray about because you think you can get it all on your own. So right now he's talking about, hey, life might be comfortable, life might be good right now, but in the end, it's not going to be so great. And so it starts off really strong, but he's honest and he's telling the truth that they need to hear. On verses 7 through the end, he addresses Christians. On verse 7 through 11, it talks about all the sufferings that Christians are going to go through, and we should expect that, but don't lose hope because he's saying to be patient. On verse 11, he says, "Behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job." And he goes on to talk about how Job lost everything. His friends who were supposed to be there to comfort him condemned him and said, "It's because of sin why you're going through this and why all your children die and why you lost everything you had." But that wasn't true. It was so God's purpose could be shown through him and his glory could be shown through him. And ultimately, in the end, God restored everything, his health, new children, and new possessions. But right here, it's telling us as we go through hard things, not to lose hope because there is a purpose in it. If we believe that God is perfect, then we know that everything that we go through, even if we can't see it at that moment, is a purpose and it is perfect. So we will remain steadfast. So right now, it's telling us to stay patient in our faith. But on verse 12, it seems to make a shift, but there is a reasoning behind it. So right here, James is talking about let your yes be a yes and your no be a no, and just do not swear either by heaven or earth. And I read that kind of backwards, but you guys get the point. The people that James was talking to was a group of Jews that would have oaths that are binding and non-binding. And their binding oaths would be the ones where they use God's name in it. And their non-binding oaths would be making a promise without saying God's name in it. And then that's basically like crossing your fingers behind and saying, "I didn't eat the candy when you did." What this is telling us is saying that the words that we speak should be truthful. This is something that we forget. I forget it. I don't know if you guys forget it. As Christians, we're called to tell the truth. And not just because we shouldn't lie, but because God calls us to be truthful. I hope you're not getting distracted by this light that's hitting my face. So on 13 through 18, it talks about prayer. And it's saying, pray when we're happy, give our praises to the Lord, pray that when we are sad and in need, and give our petitions for the Lord. So it's just telling us to pray in all circumstances. And he gives an example of a prayer of faith. This is something that I want to talk about because some people might take it out of context if we're not careful. James uses the example of Elijah, how he prayed it would not rain for 3 years and it didn't. But there is something that I want to make clear. The prayer of faith is not saying, "I know this is going to happen, so it's going to happen. I know I really want a car, so I'm going to pray that I really want a car and I'm going to get that car." It's not saying that, because that mindset comes from the idea that if I want something hard enough, God's going to give it to me. That's not what it's saying. It's saying the prayer of faith is one that will pray with expectancy, but it's the will of God that will determine whether he will answer that prayer or not. And we will trust in God and the character of God. That's the prayer of faith. The prayer of faith does not mean that every sick person on this earth is going to be healed. Please listen carefully, because some people think that by being a Christian and when you pray, you're going to get every single thing that you want, because some things stay so the glory of God will be shown. On verse 14, when it says, "Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with the oil in the name, and the prayer of faith will save the one who is sick." I honestly believe that the Lord does heal and the Lord does save. But this verse should not be taken out of context because the healing that it talks about is not only physical healing, but is also spiritual. And this is just something that I need to share because some people think that just by believing in God, that every person will be completely healed because that's reserved for heaven. We're not made perfect until we go to heaven. Some people say that the reason I'm sick is maybe because I have a sin in my life or I'm not praying to God enough, and that's not true. The reason why I'm ill and something that I've talked with the Lord is so that the glory of God could be shown. And that's just something I want to share because there's this prosperity gospel that thinks that as a Christian, you're going to get what you want if you pray hard enough, if you work hard enough, and that's not true because to be a believer, it means to depend on God and the will of God will be done, not yours, not how you want it, and not what you want to see. All right, that's something I have to make clear. And now we're going to end off in verse 19. It says, "My brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins." This is such an important thing to end off because it's saying that when we do that to a fellow friend that we know that might be straying away, even if that friendship might be broken or they might become offended, ultimately, where is their soul gonna go? That is what matters the most. I'd rather lose a friend and them know that they're straying away from God than to care so much of what they're gonna think of me or if I'm gonna say every right word that I think I need to say. So this is so important because maybe you know someone that might be falling away from their faith and they're choosing the wrong path and not choosing God in their life. Our job as believers is to see that and gently ask them, like, what's going on? Or is their relationship with God going well? But we need to come from a place of love and gentleness and in truth. That is chapter 5, and it is done. But that doesn't mean the mission of God is done. And that doesn't mean that we should close our Bibles and never read it again. I encourage you guys to keep reading the Bible and keep studying His Word and just be strong in your faith and have your heart established in Him. I will see you guys next time. Bye! Here I go.